Are you struggling to close deals? Cold outreach is wasting the time of both the buyer and seller at every stage, especially when sellers are using shallow and outdated data. Your organization can overcome these challenges with technology that translates comprehensive, high-quality buyer data into real-time insights. These deeper insights empower sales reps and teams to adopt the habits of top performers, which leads to better outcomes, like more pipeline, higher win rates, and larger deals. We call this deep sales. And we've built the first deep sales platform with the next generation of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/trial. That's linkedin.com/trial for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/trial and get started.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Dominic O'Neill, director of Haunted Ulster Live, which both Terry and I saw at this year's Unnamed Footage Festival and have gushed about on the show previously. So we are very excited for you to be here, Dominic. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to chat with you, particularly like your pick. I cannot wait to get to your pick. But before we do get to your Scarred for Life story, can you tell our listeners a little bit about Haunted Ulster Live?
Yeah, so Haunted Ulster Live is found footage horror. It is a live exploration of a haunted house in Belfast on Halloween night in 1998. And it follows a sort of local TV station in real time as they investigate poltergeist activity. And when we go to commercial breaks, we stay inside the house, so we see what's going on behind the scenes, and things get kind of weird. It's had a pretty good festival run. It's probably near the end of its festival run. Unnamed Footage Fest in San Francisco was the theatrical premiere, which was really, really cool for us, and it was amazing to see all the reviews coming in. A lot of people are enjoying it. It's getting sort of Ghost Watch comparisons, which is fairly expected, given that the premise is almost exactly the same as Ghost Watch from the outset anyway. Also WNUF Halloween special. People who are into that particular niche of found footage seem to be enjoying it. And we're expecting it to get a release on VOD it'll be on VOD by Halloween anyway this year, across a few different territories, including North America. It's a Halloween film, so it has to be ready for Halloween.
Oh, yeah. So exciting! That's awesome.
Hell yeah. Well, I mean, were you inspired by Ghost Watch? Like, just point blank, was that an inspiration for you for this at all?
Yeah, definitely, but more so kind of like ghost hunting TV shows.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
Which it has a slightly different nuance to it, because those shows kind of started in I wonder, did they start in the UK or in the States, but probably late 90s anyway would be the earliest ones. And probably like they were sort of influenced by Ghost Watch, but what I like most about the ghost hunting TV shows is just the kind of, like, I used to sort of think about all these kind of paranormal investigators, like, what were they like when they went home? What were their real lives like? How did they get into this? Like, what happened to them that sort of, or do they really believe it? Is it just entertainment for them? I was kind of really interested in that sort of stuff. And also just the idea of putting it into a Northern Ireland context in the 90s. There was a lot of material there, I thought. So it was a few different things. Also the idea of doing your first feature, if you come up with a concept which is as cheap as a feature can be, then it's a good one for your first. And found footage single camera setup, all in one night, one location. It ticks all those boxes as well.
Cool. But like you really use that one camera, one location setup so well with like using the different levels of the house, and there's the DJ that you cut to, and it's cool to see how you utilize space to make it feel bigger than just like a haunted house thing. And yeah.
That's kind of the freedom of like a live broadcast is, you know,
Yeah.
you can cut between things. And obviously a lot of that happened in the edit. We had issues, we had things that we hadn't quite got right, and we were sort of really a film like that, you make it in the edit. Getting the location was key, because I think a film like Haunted Ulster Live, you know, you could shoot it on your phone, you know, with actors in a few days. But if you don't have the location, it's not going to look right. It's just the location is everything.
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't shoot it on a phone, you know, but we were so lucky. Like I posted up an ad looking for the specs for the house, and I very clear in my head the kind of house, sort of 1908 big detached houses that you get in Belfast. And within like 3 hours, I was having a conversation with somebody, and within a matter of days, we were in his house. It was amazing. Hadn't been modernized. There was nobody living in it at the minute, and it was just perfect. And that was like, okay,
that's kismet. That is like, that is meant to be.
It really was. And it also gave us a deadline for when we could shoot it. So it really pushed us.
Nice.
So our shooting schedule went from 3 weeks, 2 weeks to 1 week. And it was like, well, fuck it. If we have to do it in 1 week, we have to do it in 1 week, which we did.
Wait, you shot this all in a week?
You did it in a week?
We shot in the house for 6 days, inside and outside for 6 days. And then we did a couple of half days of additional stuff in the film, you know.
Wow.
I know. We had an amazing first AD who didn't break a sweat.
I need everyone who's listening to this to understand that the first AD is literally like the best person on set. Like if you have a good first AD, they make a break. Just saying. They do not get enough appreciation for how much they get fucking done on set.
Yeah. And they help create the culture and the atmosphere and the tone on set. Yes. Help you get the best out of everybody. Make sure that, you know, that everybody that you know, if we go into overtime, we call it overtime, because you don't want people getting pissed off and feeling resentful when they go home because they're already not working for very much, you know. Yeah. An amazing first AD who I will work with again if he's free on the next film. Yeah.
So you mentioned pulling out like performances from people, and I just gotta shout out Mark Claney and Amy Richardson. What a perfect duo. They're so good in this.
They really are. They really, really are. I know. What more can I say about that? We had an amazing cast who put everything into it, and they just got the characters. They got the nuances of the characters. I hope that when people watch Haunted Ulster Live, what sets it apart a little bit is that the characters are a bit more rounded than you're used to in those kinds of films. And hopefully that goes for a lot of the other characters as well. We have incredible actors in Belfast. A lot of the cast knew each other, and we had 2 days of rehearsal where we just sat in a circle in a room and read through the script a few times and worked on things. And a lot of them had experience of working with each other, and there was just that kind of atmosphere of everybody kind of pulling in the same direction, you know. Mark is brilliant, and he is not like Jerry Burns at all. He's the most gentle, quiet, unassuming person. I don't think Mark has a smartphone. You know, I had contacted him, I email him. You know, yeah.
It's so amazing to me, like hearing that. Your time schedule for shooting, and then seeing the performances that you managed to capture. Like I guess it just shows their talent behind their characters, because I would not have guessed that this was like we got to do this really quick type of type of shooting schedule?
You know, I don't always talk about how tight the shooting schedule was, because it gives people preconceived notions about a film. But you know, as you guys well know, like what it really means is that you have less time for takes. You might get one or
Yeah.
two or three. You know, at the start of the day it's 4, at the end of the day it's 1. That sort of thing. But you know, you're kind of set up to fail in that scenario. But I don't know, just having the right cast and the right
Great
crew.
team.
It just made it happen. You know, I'll never forget that fear, the first assembly cut, when you're watching everything and you're like, oh God, what have we done? But you know that it's part of the process. It's just part of the process. And we had a great edit, and Will McConnell, who produces with me, edited it as well. And we had a great time in the edit with the film. You know, we really did. You know, as you can imagine by watching it, like, we're of an age where, you know, we remember 1998 pretty well, and we were really working through a lot of our own you know, childhood stuff or teenage stuff through the film, and really recreating a lot of the really weird TV that we had here, because in the 90s in Northern Ireland we had, like, you know, the Troubles were kind of coming to an end, you know, inverted commas, at that time. But TV was like this alternate world where, you know, local TV, where everything was kind of perfect and nobody mentioned the Troubles, and it was just a weird kind of mirror reality, you know, Lynchian almost in some ways.
Yeah.
And so we tried to capture that kind of weird version of the world that gets broadcast into people's homes living in post-conflict societies. You know?
Cool. Wait, that's so
Wow.
I had a friend in grad school who like wrote about post-Troubles Irish cinema. So now I have to force her to watch this. This is much more fun than a lot of the movies that she's written about and talks about. But I always, whenever I hear about a movie that has to do like anything regarding the Troubles, I make her watch it, because I'm like, there's not a lot of them. Have another one.
And now there's more and more now, because as I'm sure you've noticed, Irish cinema is really booming. You know,
it really is.
Really, really is. And when Kneecap comes out, that's going to be huge. Kneecap won the audience award at Sundance. It's set in Belfast. It's about it's a fictional biography of a real band. They're an Irish language rap hip hop band called Kneecap, and I got to see the film. It is great. It's really, really good. It's going to ruffle a few feathers when it's released, I think. And so Sony bought it straight out of Sundance, so it's going. I reckon it'll get a big release.
Cool.
So it's another one to add to the book.
Hell yeah. Well, I want to hear about your relationship to horror and how you kind of started getting into the genre. Did you get into it as a kid?
When I was a kid, I watched anything I could get my hands on. Okay. I was definitely drawn to, like, you mentioned Ghostwatch earlier. The night I watched Ghostwatch when it was broadcast, and it was the same night that I saw Halloween for the first time.
Whoa!
Oh wow!
Which obviously is not my scarred for life pick, but like, that leaves a mark on you. And seeing Halloween, like, that was like 1992, when it was still before the slasher revival, when Halloween was still had this kind of aura around it, because there'd been a lot of imitations, but it hadn't been sort of parodied within an edge of its own life.
Right.
But I was always like terrified of horror films, but I would still watch them, and I still am. This is the weird thing. I actually, I don't think I've ever said this to anybody before, but I actually I scared myself writing the script for Haunted Ulster Live.
Did you really?
Like, yeah, I did. Because I was sitting up in the attic, and I was just writing. I remember just reading the draft of the script, and just like I got a real kind of like uneasy feeling. I don't think these things ever leave you. I mean, it's kind of, if you can scare yourself, that's probably a good thing. But I still get scared by horror films, but I still love watching horror films. It's kind of a weird thing. I sometimes I wonder if other people have kind of numbed themselves to it, or if they still get that kind of, that kind of childhood fear, But to me, it's a good thing that I just try to weaponize it, I suppose,
Yeah, I love when people are still get scared from movies, because I mean it takes a lot more to scare me now than it did as a kid, because I've constantly watching new horror films. But I mean, because we recently talked with Brad Dourif, and he's like, I can't, I will wait in the lobby. I can't do horror films. And so it's always funny to me to find out, like, the people that are, iconic in horror and are like, yeah, it scares the shit out of me. So I love that.
I know my own imagination, and I have a really dark imagination. I just can't help it. And there's things that stick in my head. Like, I remember there's a podcast called Unexplained. I don't know if you know it. Unexplained. It's amazing. It's kind of a monologue storytelling podcast, and he goes through
Okay.
ghost stories, UFOs, all sorts. But he told a two-part story, and there was just a scene in it of a man in a cottage that was haunted, and he opened the door to the room that his toddler was sleeping in the crib, and he opened the door, and there was just an old woman with his back to him sitting on the bed staring at the toddler. And it's just, the image has just stuck in my head for about 5 years. And I have two young
Wow.
kids. And every now and again, in the right circumstances, it just pops into my head, or the wrong circumstances.
Gonna open
But
up the door and you're gonna see something there. Like, yeah,
yeah,
I can
Like,
get
what do you
that.
even
check
do?
in.
Like, what do you even do as a parent? I mean, I guess like you're supposed to like save them. I'm not a parent, so I'm like,
It
what the
is
fuck do you
it,
do?
it's a good question. Nobody tells you what to do. there,
Like, good
there's
luck.
no there's no book. There's probably
What
lots
to
of
do?
books, but I haven't read them. But
What
but
to do
there,
if ghost manifests in child's room?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if I was in that situation, I would just assume I'm hallucinating, and
Right.
probably like phone somebody and say I need to go to a hospital. But I don't know. But also, might you be so frightened that you would just pass out? I don't know. I mean, I
That's
like to
me.
think that parental instinct would kick in, but on the other hand, I might just be straight out of the house.
You're like, oops, sorry. We can have another kid.
Yeah.
I'm out.
So I can you know maybe that's like a good place to start with horror. But when I was in my teens, I really got into George Romero films and all the
Okay.
seventies, slasher films, all the classics, and then started getting into like all the kind of British, all the British folk horror from the 70s, and a lot of
Oh,
Hammer horror as well. I love
Yeah.
all the kind of Christopher Lee Dracula films. Are
Yeah.
great. No, they're obviously pretty schlocky, but I've always loved the
they're
colors in
so
those. The
they're so fun.
Technicolor. They are fun.
The Horror of Dracula is one of my favorite Dracula movies ever. My dad, like, I grew up sort of watching the 1930s
Yeah.
Universal monster movies, and then my dad loved Hammer horror and he loved Christopher Lee. And so yeah, I'm that was my education as well too.
And they've loads of like real English character actors in those that you would have seen on TV in soaps or like whatever, like pop, and then they'll pop up in, uh, Taste the Blood of Dracula or something, so
Mhm.
there's that kind of, always that kind of interest. And then obviously like I was Blair Witch Project, I saw on Halloween night in 1999.
Oh my
And of
God.
course, now that you know me a bit better, it scared the absolute shit out of me.
Yeah.
I was staying in my parents' house, and my mum told me the next day she heard me. I slept in the attic. I don't know why I always have to be in the attic. She heard me open the door and just hammer up every single stair up to my bedroom. But the Blair Witch stayed with me, like in a way where like I still remember the feeling. And we were with friends, and I remember he was completely white, like he was just absolutely white afterwards. There was just, and of course there were also people who walked out because that was, some people were
Did
like,
you think it was real? Did you believe
No.
it was real when you saw it? Okay.
no, I didn't.
I did.
But I was still scared by it. But I remember
Oh, yeah.
I remember the Curse of the Blair Witch documentary being on like Sci-Fi Channel.
Uh-huh.
And just
Yeah,
being
yeah.
like, and I think we watched it or some of it at my house before the film, and I remember just thinking how weird this is. That like they've made like a documentary about a film, which is also a documentary. Like it was so ballsy and weird
Yeah.
to do that, you know. See, the thing about the Blair Witch was I think most of us knew it wasn't real, but everybody enjoyed the game.
I
And
thought it was real.
yeah, so, and what age were you when you saw it? Did you see it in the cinema or?
I saw I saw it opening weekend. I would have
Mhm.
been 18 then, and I was like, it terrified the shit out of me because
That's
I thought it was
amazing.
real. I thought it was real.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So some people did. And
Yeah.
did you have a moment where you had the realization that it wasn't?
It was like right after that, when I found out that I think at some point the cast was doing like late night TV stuff at that point,
Yeah.
and so it was like
Yeah.
it kind of. I mean, I was like, oh, and then I felt really dumb because I honestly like I all I knew was that this was a movie and it was the most terrifying movie ever, and I had seen that sci-fi documentary and I thought it was real. I thought it was a real
Mm.
documentary, and I was like, what are we watching? Are we watching a snuff film? Like I was so like distraught over it. And then to find out afterwards, it's wild.
I, I've always been interested in mythology and folklore. And again, you can probably tell that with Haunted Ulster Live. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something with the Blair Witch Project that really, really stuck with me. How they, all of the backstory, the interviews they're doing with people, like they created this like overly complicated backstory that I still don't 100% understand. I couldn't explain it to you, but because of that, it makes it seem even more real. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, you wouldn't invent all this, and of course, some of that must have been the cast improvising, ad-libbing, working off whatever rough stuff they had. But I'd never seen a film do that before, where it created it created a whole history around the film that was almost impenetrable and made it feel more real. And that's stuff that's probably lost when people watch it now. But like most great horror, because it's been so imitated, it's never going to have the same impact
Yeah.
for a 20-year-old watching it now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which was the same thing about Halloween. As soon as the 90s came around,
Yeah.
you can't recreate how that felt. But
Yeah.
Halloween is still fantastic. I think it stood the test of time in a way that a lot of 70s horror films haven't, and I think it's mainly because the handheld camera voyeuristic stuff in it feels so reality TV sometimes. It's
Yeah.
kind of it's
Yeah.
properly creepy.
It feels gross. You feel gross watching it.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we don't let things, I think, well, and again, there's a lot happening in indie horror, which I guess like Halloween was indie. So I'm always curious, like, what's gonna be like the Halloween from our generation? You know what I mean? Because like, what's gonna be reappraised? Of like, oh, that was gross and weird, and I can't believe they made that, but it was like an indie thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's so
Yeah.
interesting to see like what prevails.
I think you can't go to extremes of gore, of violence, of
Yeah,
depravity anymore. So maybe it's like a Skinamarink or something where somebody
yeah,
pulls
definitely something
everything
like
back
that.
completely. Because I suppose you could say in the 90s you had Scream, Blair Witch Project, and then Paranormal Activity, I suppose, was another like benchmark, which also scared the shit out of me, of course. But I watched that on a laptop for the first time, which I think is perfect way to watch
That's
Paranormal
exactly
Activity.
how I watched it for the first time. Like on a laptop, headphones on, no one was home. I was in high school and I was like, I'm gonna shit my pants. Like this is my worst nightmare. It was so scary.
It's made for laptop, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the next thing? I don't know.
I saw it. Well, I mean, I think Hereditary is like the one that comes to mind a whole lot for like.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. And Midsummer, I absolutely love. I I never forget that first scene in Midsummer where the boyfriend, like I love the setup that dickhead boyfriend's trying to break up with his girlfriend, but unfortunately, just when he's about to do it, her
She's
sister
having the
kills.
worst night of her life.
It's so brilliant. It's so dark. It's almost comedic, but it is.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing setup. But that scene where he's had the call, and he's walking back to the house, and I think it's a sound of a siren that then blends into her screaming, and the way she's crying on his lap. It is so real. It's so visceral. It's incredible. It's so good. I think about that a lot. That's the kind of stuff you watch, and you're like, I should stop making films.
Cool. Well, we've talked about Haunted Ulster Live, your horror history, but Dominic, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
I have brought Psycho 2.
Psycho 2. So in Psycho 2, after 22 years of psychiatric care, Norman Bates attempts to return to a life of solitude, but the specters of his crimes and his mother continue to haunt him.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so take us back, Dominic. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this? What about this scared you, and why is this your Scarred for Life pick?
So I was 13, and I went into the Radio Times database to check when I watched it, and I had a feeling it was early teens, and it was because it was on TV. It was June 1993. So I was 13 years old. The Radio Times have they've archived everything, so it was. I knew that it was definitely on TV, and I watched it with my brother and sister. I think there's no way I watched it with my mum, because she would have watched like The Omen and The Changeling, which were very, very popular Catholic horror films for some reason in the 80s and 90s. But Psycho 2 is, it's a bit more of a slasher film in some ways. But anyway, I had probably already seen Psycho by this stage, but I'm not 100%. But Psycho 2 was a big deal. I remember it being like it had a similar kind of status as Halloween, I reckon, at that time, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, I think so, because it was considered kind of more of like a post-Halloween slasher, but obviously using the Hitchcockian, using Psycho and kind of Hitchcock's kind of like his, not just his suspense, but also the way it kind of obscures exactly what's going on, and it's almost like it is. I suppose it is who done it as well. But I had never seen a horror film that I remember that feeling of like purposely confusing the audience on making you feel sympathy for Norman Bates in the film, because for so much of the film you don't know if he is the killer or not. And I rewatched it yesterday, and I'm still not entirely sure who Norman Bates killed exactly. Like and I haven't. I'm sure I'll find tomorrow 100 YouTube videos that will tell me exactly who he killed.
Oh, I'm sure.
I haven't watched them yet. But I'd never seen a film like that before, where there wasn't like, where the baddie was, you were almost rooting for him, because everybody else is trying to, and this is the thing I really, really, really remember, they're trying to make him go mad. Instead of just leaving him alone, well, first of all, he should never have moved back to that fucking house. That was the biggest mistake.
Well,
what the fuck? I was so
Why?
mad.
I know. Don't go back to the house, And his doctor takes him upstairs and says, "Oh yeah, that's your mother's room. Okay, bye-bye." He just leaves.
So like realistically, I can understand it because he's been in psychiatric care for a very long time. He probably doesn't have any money. The only thing he has is this house. So like I can understand like realistically, but I that is my one thing is I don't think the movie necessarily establishes that very well. And I was sitting there going, why? You know that this is going to be a trigger for you. Why are you going to this place?
Yeah, they just want to get him in the house as quickly as possible. There's a couple of things like that you have to overlook, which obviously didn't occur to me as a child, but there are a couple of contrivances that you have to overlook. But I suppose I'd never seen a film like that where the main character is a killer or has been a killer, obviously in the past, but you really are rooting for them. And that I feel like that kind of these days we're so used to TV shows where the main characters are complete assholes, or maybe there's a group of people and they're all assholes, and it's kind of a thing now, isn't it? It's kind of, in a way, it's good because it's like human beings are complex, and it's kind of it's TV writing is, it's usually the RTV shows and are got better and better where the quality of writing is exceptional and it's all about character. But I'd never seen a film like that where you were actually like feeling really sorry for the main character who is also a murderer. And the film really, and I remember that line, the creepiest line where he just kind of like sinks down onto his feet and he says it's starting again.
Yes,
it's so great. And
that's a great line.
The end, I remembered really well the end where he's on the phone to nobody, but he thinks it's his mother. And May takes the phone off him and says, "There's nobody there, Norman," and hands it back to him. But he continues the conversation. And the way Anthony Perkins does it, it is so creepy. It's so creepy. You really care for him as well. It's just because he acts like he's so vulnerable in it, even though he's quite big and imposing. And the toasted cheese sandwiches, like, it became kind of mythical for me. What is a toasted cheese sandwich? Then I realized it's just like, bread with toast and cheese grilled on it.
Yeah, unfortunately not
so
as
delicious,
exciting, but they are really
so
good.
delicious.
It's true.
And of course you need a massive bread knife to cut one of those.
Of course.
Duh.
So was it the general feeling of, because you're watching someone that is a killer and it puts you in a weird situation, or were there specific like scenes that you remember scaring you as a kid?
Yeah. I probably saw, it was probably a TV edit at the time.
Okay.
But I remember pretty well the motel owner, which is basically turned into like a den of like drugs and prostitutes. And I loved that actor who's in NYPD Blue. I can't remember his name, but he's like, if you need like a greasy scuzzball in an 80s film, it's him.
It's him.
It's like the guy can sweat on cue,
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
I always remember the scene in the diner where Norman is in the kitchen, and it's just that brilliant thing of like it's almost kind of Spielbergian, like the tension is building. You know something's going to happen. He's and that's what I liked about it as well. Like even though it's got slasher horror elements, it's also just got like unrelenting tension in the cafe scene where the greasy guy is coming on to the waitress. Norman is cooking chips over like really, really hot oil. No, he's cutting the lettuce first of all.
He's cutting the lettuce.
He's cutting the lettuce.
He's just cutting it, and you naturally assume he's either going to do something with that knife to himself or to somebody else, but he doesn't. But they just keep that going for ages, and then there's a thing with the hot chip pan, and I really remember that feeling in that scene of just like, what is going to happen here? You're just waiting for Norman to go off, and all of the characters are almost goading him into doing it.
Yeah.
It's just I've never really seen a film like that before. Certainly never seen a horror film treat its antagonists that way, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw this when I was a kid. I'm not 100% sure when, but I had a realization. We recorded recently about Critters 2, and I've known that I've done this before where I will watch a movie, the first movie in a franchise, and if it terrifies me, I will turn it off. And that happened to me with Alien, and then I would watch the sequel. I would watch Aliens, and I'd be like, okay, I can handle this. I can go back to Alien. And I did it with Psycho. I watched the first Psycho, and I was at my um babysitter's house. She was very free in what I could watch. We were watching this together, and it wasn't like the scene that most people probably think with her getting stabbed in the shower that broke me as a kid. It was the I think it was Loomis walking up the stairs and then just Norman coming out and stabbing him in the head and then
Oh
falling down the stairs. And that was the point. I
yeah.
was like, I can't, I'm done. And so I ended up watching Psycho 2 afterwards, and it didn't bother me. I was like, okay, I can handle it now. But it was like, it's become like a thing because I didn't realize that I did that before with Critters 2. And it was like a realization, no, this was like my MO. I would see the first movie and it'd be like, I can't handle it anymore. And I would go watch a sequel and then I'd be able to come back to it. And so I saw Psycho 2 when I was a kid, but I honestly, the only things I remembered was I remembered that he wasn't the one doing the killings initially. Is my first memory from a kid, and the other one. And I was watching this movie and I was like, I'm fairly certain someone gets a knife in their mouth, and I was just
Yeah.
waiting for that to scene to happen, and it took a long time to get to that. But I was like, am I misremembering this? Is there not someone getting stabbed in the mouth? And I was like, oh, there it is. Thank God, because I was like, but those are literally the only things I remember about this movie from when I was a kid. So watching it last night was quite a treat because I gasped when it's revealed because I knew that Lila was the one that was kind of orchestrating it, but I completely forgot that Meg Tilly's character was involved too, and I gasped watching it last night because it was such a
Yeah.
good reveal.
That's interesting because I was wondering what it would be like to watch it without knowing that because her performance is kind of weird. I don't know how I feel watching it because I was yesterday. I had remembered that I'd read years ago that the two of them didn't get on when they were making it. But yesterday I was watching it and I was thinking, is she acting weird because she's got something to hide, or is she just acting weird? And I still don't know where I stand on that. It's kind of an odd one. And then I mean, I think other people maybe like her performance in it, but there's something about it that I don't know. It's kind of
So
odd.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I was watching it being like, it felt like I was like, did someone dub over her lines? Like it felt like she was acting in like a totally different movie because it felt like Anthony Perkins was giving this like incredible performance, and I liked her performance, but sometimes like when she was doing like
Interesting.
when she was speaking to other people, not Norman, it sounded like she was a robot a little bit, like
She was
robotic and very,
pretty flat.
and it was just like weird because there are parts where she's not. So
Yeah.
I don't, it was like really inconsistent to me, especially from like the beginning towards the end. It was a really weirdly inconsistent performance, which
You
was
know,
like, I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know if this is on purpose or what. And I don't know if it's because she was trying to hide something. I maybe it just is like a weird performance.
I, you know, I suppose somebody could argue that in some ways she's like a mirror to Norman, and you know, she's not playing the sort of like blonde, you know, the kind of blonde sort of
Yeah.
Janet Lee sort of character that that they could easily have cast, and instead she is her own version of a weird, awkward, introverted person, and that draws her to Norman. But I don't know if they were doing that. But it's certainly an interesting choice, you know.
So fascinating because
Yeah.
I thought she was so good in this. Like I was enamored with her performance in this. So it's so
Well, there you
fascinating to
go.
me.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean,
Well, I'm
that,
glad you were. I mean, like, I didn't think it was, again, it just like really just to me was like totally inconsistent. And I was just
yeah.
confused as to why it didn't fit the movie all like every time to me. So
see, now I want to watch it again and pay more attention to it, because I was like,
totally.
I was like, I'm like, she's GOAT. I love her. She is so good in this. Like, I was like digging her performance in this. And then again, when the twist happened, when it's revealed, I was like, I literally, I gasped and went, oh, because I was not expecting it.
I did. So this is my first time ever seeing this movie. I have never seen it. And I did not know anything about this. So when it happened, I was like, I paused it. I was like, wait a fucking second. Because it's like, it's dropped like relatively casually. There isn't just like a, whoa. It's more just like, hi, mother. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. And then they start talking about it. I was like, oh my God. And it's just like and then like the amount of twists and turns in it, it was very much like grasping my pearls every couple of minutes.
It feels a little bit TV, like a little bit soap opera, maybe.
It's a little soap opera, but like I loved it because Anthony Perkins is like really attractive in his little gay turtlenecks. And just like, it's just also like, I think a really good story. I was really surprised. Like, this is one of the best sequels I think I've ever seen. You know what I'm like? And I didn't realize it was 19. I think I watched, I think like a 4K restoration, and I was like, didn't realize it was 1983 because the version I watched looked so good. And I was like, oh wow, this really is like so kind of in that slasher period. And it makes sense why it does feel like a weird Hitchcockian, like they do a Hitchcockian slasher, I think, very well, though. I thought I was quite impressed with how well they kind of captured that vibe.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed watching it as well. The other thing I forgot to mention as a kid, the final scene, like the shovel.
Oh my God, it was so good.
It is so incredibly well paced because they've kind of seeded it that he's got the poison in
he's got the poison, yes.
And he puts I suppose this is all spoilers, but
we're spoiling.
We're full
it's all
spoilers.
good.
He poisons her, and then he thinks, "Oh fuck this!" It's incredible.
I forgot that there was a final stinger with this, with like the twist that his mom wasn't really his mom. Like, I totally didn't even remember that as a kid. And so we're getting to the end and I'm like, what is going on here? And I cackled so hard when he took that shovel and just bashed the shit out of her. I was like, this is so unexpected. What a great ending.
And when I was a kid, I thought that was all in his head. It's only now I realized it, which, to be honest, might work a little bit better, because the idea that old lady was going around murdering people it's a stretch.
I mean, a lot of this movie is a stretch, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it is very like melodramatic, but I also think that works. Like, they lean into it in a way that works. They're not like, I don't know. They didn't go too far into it, but I don't know. The melodrama of it is quite incredible.
And the score is fantastic as well.
It's so good.
Remember that at all. It is so good. And you know, like, so many things, like that closing shot of him, like how good does the house look? The way they shoot the house from down below, like a telescopic lens, and in the color. Oh, it's incredible.
Color is so beautiful.
Color is fantastic.
The color really is fantastic.
I mean, this is a ballsy sequel, right? Because like Psycho by the 80s is like iconic, right? And it's like, it's part of the lexicon of cinema. And here we are in 1983, years after that movie. And it's like, we're going to make a sequel now. And I think that's so ballsy to do it. Like, now, again, I think you would call this like a legacy sequel, because it's, 20 years down the line or whatever. But it's like, the fact that, because I think they knew that they could not recreate what Hitchcock did. There'd be no way of like trying to do a similar movie, or, basically do a remake as a sequel. There's no way they could do it. And so what I love that they did with this is, everyone like leaves Psycho and he's like, oh, Norman is crazy. And so here we are 22 years later, and everyone around him wants him to be crazy so bad that they in fact make him the villain, is a way that I was like reading it when I was rewatching it last night. So he is like trying to move on. He's gotten his help, but everything is stacked against him. Like everyone seems to be like, oh, that's crazy Norman. He's gonna go mad and kill someone. And so there's something very like emotional about seeing that kind of downward spiral for him, that where everyone wants him to be. And so it's sort of like, well, now he is, and whose fault is it that he went back down this path? So I think there's some interesting questions being raised here.
Yeah, yeah. And the May and her mother, their whole relationship, and the scene where he is attacking May's mother, Vera Mills, but she's dressed as his mother. Like there's some brilliant stuff in there. Like there must be about 4 people dress up as Norman's mother at some stage in the film.
I was trying to keep track. I'm like, who the fuck is like? How many people have dressed up as his mom? Like, what is going on?
I know. And they gotta hide the mother's clothes inside the cold bunker of the house for some reason.
So
I think it's funny that when the boy disappeared, they all just thought, nah, the doctor's like, no, that it couldn't have been Norman, he was locked upstairs. Like, seriously, they all forget that boy disappeared pretty quickly.
Right. But so like what I think is also so fascinating about this is I think there was a lot of care going into this, which surprised me, because you think, Psycho 2, you're making a sequel 20 years down the line to an iconic film, and yet like the Australian director Richard Franklin was Hitchcock's student, so he's the director of this, and he
was okay.
Yeah, he was a student of Hitchcock, so it's like, okay, we got that. Jerry Goldsmith was like in love with the original score. And so like we have him on, who is the more and more I revisit movies from that time period, I'm realizing how much Jerry Goldsmith was sort of like the composer of my childhood. Like all of the movies that I loved,
yeah,
he's attached to it. And so we have that, and then we have returning characters, of course Anthony Perkins, but also Vera Miles as Leela. Like there's like that connection to it that surprised me, because I honestly was, when I was sitting down to rewatch this last night, and all I could remember in my head was that Norman wasn't killing people and someone gets a knife to the mouth. Like I was not expecting this to be as, I mean, I don't want to say classy, but like as classy as it actually was.
Yeah. No, they put a lot of, and obviously this is stuff that I only got from rewatching it myself, but they put a lot of care into recreating a lot of shots from the original film.
Yeah.
Recreate the house, which is all like soundstage. Like that's the house on the Universal lot, I think, at the minute. And it just kind of, I don't know. I know what you mean. It just sort of, it takes a lot of care with the characters. Obviously, they wanted Anthony Perkins to come back, so they found a way. I suppose part of bringing him back was giving his character like a new sense of life, like a new sense of purpose, like the idea that he could live a normal life, and he would be he would have all these people trying to make him go crazy, and he would have that to kind of like fight against. Like you can kind of see how putting a new spin on the character like that would have appealed to him. And as we said before, like it looks so beautiful. Like it's a really nice looking film.
It really is.
I think the biggest thing that bothers me about this movie, and I think it might be nitpicking, but it makes such a big deal at the end of the first movie to have this like long-winded explanation about like his mental illness and how he's essentially like this is 2024 terms, like a trans woman, but he's like, because he is playing with his gender, there's a lot of weird gender stuff going on in the first one, and I think for this one they kind of, and again I know it's 1983, it's not like 2024, it's not a contemporary time. They just kind of brush that under the rug. And again, I understand like 1983 gender politics are not obviously going to be as progressive as they are today, but watching it, I was like, oh, we're just gonna like glaze over. Okay. We're just gonna say he was crazy and he's fine now. Oh, okay. And I guess like it's the 80s and I just gotta like forget it and like lock it away and like but not and sometimes like not look at it in that lens. But it's just it's fascinating to see like what they kind of kept from what happened to him and what they might have nitpicked out a little bit to kind of make a different it felt a little bit like
like
not
a retcon?
trying to see through it's not a retcon. It's
okay.
And it's like it's not trying to see Anthony. It's not trying to see Norman the rose-colored glasses. I don't necessarily think they're trying to make him like. I think they're trying to play with it being an interesting like is he the bad guy? Is he the good guy? But it does feel a little bit like trying to make him a more palatable character by like removing that, especially in the 1980s. And maybe I'm overthinking it. Like maybe it's not that serious, but it's just interesting to like especially in the 80s when like the AIDS crisis is kind of like, you know, it's I think it's like it's going on and it's, you know, we know what the regressive politics around that. So it feels less than to me less than like no less than but like it feels a little bit purposeful to maybe kind of erase that from the record. I don't know. That was my biggest complaint about the movie. I was just I don't know.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't know. I thought it was refreshing that we're getting away from that because I think that, I mean, you know, we're talking about a time when we have Dress to Kill and we have like that, which is also kind of like indebted to Hitchcock's Psycho. And we have like, so we have that kind of stuff. And I was kind of glad that we're sort of just not going back on that trope that was so hurtful. So like I get completely, I cannot disagree with what you're saying whatsoever, but I don't know. I guess I found it refreshing that we weren't going to go back to that same old well, if that makes sense.
When I was reading about Anthony Perkins today, you know, there could be something in what you're saying because I mean, his life it's pretty sad to think.
We were talking about that before you logged on earlier about how sad this man's life was.
I went down a rabbit hole. It sounds like you did too, of like reading like Wikipedia and finding out about his life and just being like,
even there's a lot on Wikipedia. Somebody spent a lot of time on his Wikipedia.
I was so surprised. I was gobbling it up. I was just reading it. And I was like, man, and
that much.
A lot.
Nope, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the whole fact that he went through, you know, conversion therapy, inverted commas, which presumably happened between this and Psycho. So the idea that, you know,
it was between this and
it must have been because
like when he was like an adult.
He was married in the 70s, I think. So there could be something in that idea that, like, you know, I'll do it, but I don't want to dress up. I want to be portrayed as somebody trying to go straight, I suppose, you know, inverted commas. There's possibly a little bit of that in it because the studio apparently, as you'll know, having read Wikipedia, the studio wouldn't let him be in Some Like It Hot because they didn't want him cross-dressing, because they didn't want to emphasize, you know, the fact that he was, if not, you know, openly gay, that people in the industry knew.
Yeah, like the Paramount president, Barney Balaban, hated Perkins because of his homosexuality. I guess he was in an ongoing relationship.
Sorry.
Yeah. I guess he was in a relationship with Tab Hunter, and Wikipedia says that Balaban believed Perkins was flaunting his homosexuality too much, and so he was constantly pressuring Perkins into breaking up with him and to go into conversion therapy for 5 years. That Perkins was under contract for the studio. Like, it's just his life is so sad.
Yeah.
But I think like I've realized this as we've been going through this podcast, where you start to see like a lot of the, particularly post Hays Code, with the way that in which people were forced to be in the closet, and just seeing the kind of sadness that results from that is just, it's, I don't know, it's a whole lot. And I was like in my feelings just like reading through this today, because I was like, this is so, it's so upsetting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. And, and then obviously how he died as well.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine, like, for his family and anybody who knew him. But I don't know. I was looking at the roles that he wasn't allowed to take or he couldn't take, and you're like, fucking hell! Like, this guy could have been James Dean, or
Yeah.
could have been in West Side Story, or could have been in Billy Wilder films. But what really comes out is that he just seemed like a really humble, nice guy who did not want to be a movie star.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? We have this film because, in some ways, like, this is maybe the performance of his career, because he is just so brilliant in it. Really, really brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
he gets to do everything in it, and he makes you care for somebody that you probably shouldn't care about, which is quite a feat.
Well, and I think it seems to be that's why he took the role, because initially he wasn't going to do it. But there's a quote that says, "When I received Tom Holland's script," which I want to talk about that too, "I liked it very much. It was really Norman's story." And apparently the studio was looking into recasting Norman with Christopher Walken at one point.
Oh, wow. No, I can actually see that.
But like I think because of how much like he resonated with Tom Holland's script, that is the reason why he took it, which I have to say, I love Tom Holland's script. It's amazing. I didn't realize that he wrote this, so it's amazing to me that, the guy that would go on to do Fright Night and Child's Play
Yeah,
and all of these did this, like, wrote
it's
this.
incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's so, I think the script is very smart. And I think that's like what surprised the heck out of me rewatching it last night, because like I said, all I remembered was knife in the mouth. And I'm so sitting down and watching it and just realizing that this is I mean, it's an hour and 55 minutes, but it never felt slow to me. It felt perfectly paced. And it reminded me of the first time watching Psycho, just the way in which you are taken on a journey. And I think that it does some very smart subversions with kind of like the twist where in Psycho, it's the person we're following ends up getting murdered here, and here it's like the female character we're following in here is in a subversion, is the one that's trying to drive him crazy. And so I just think I just am enamored with this script, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. And Tom Holland is the deputy in
Yeah.
deputy sheriff, and all the characters, character actors in it as well, like the sheriff. And there's just there's just this sort of, like, it almost feels like Columbo or something. Sometimes you've just got this kind of
Yeah.
this disdain for authority that kind of
Yeah.
like seeps through,
Ugh. Yeah. I
I want to go down a rabbit hole about gender in Psycho 2 now. Okay, but we won't do that.
Like,
But I'm just like
there's
so like I feel like there's something, but it doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
no,
I
there
will.
definitely is. There definitely is. Like, I'll be looking that up. I've never watched Psycho 3. I might watch it this week now, because he actually directed it.
He did, yeah. And I've heard it's fun. I've heard
Yeah.
it's I've so like because I have not seen Psycho 3 or 4. Psycho 4 was directed by Mick Garris,
Yeah.
and Psycho 3 was by Anthony Perkins. And I honestly, I think this weekend I'm probably gonna watch the two of them, because
Yeah.
I'm like on a roll.
Psycho
Like, this
pilled.
movie just energized me.
There's
yeah.
a 4. You'll want to lower your expectations, because I think it's a TV movie, and
Yeah.
the Norman Bates is like a framing device. So
Yeah.
but I've heard good things about 3. I've never said tonight I'm going to sit down and watch Psycho 3, but that might happen tomorrow.
So this is what I wanted to bring up. I was surprised to see, and it makes sense once you see the movie. I was surprised to see that Dean Cundey is the the DP for this, because he would go on to do, he did Halloween, he did The Fog, he did Escape from New
Yeah.
York, The Thing, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, Apollo 13. Like
Wow.
what an
Nothing
amazing
but
career.
bangers. What the fuck?
Yeah. And so
Unreal.
like seeing him as the cinematographer for this makes sense, because this movie has like some very fantastic angles and some dissolve. There's like a really great dissolve where I think it was when he's in the attic and he's locked in there, and the camera kind of pans, and then all of a sudden we're down by the cellar window where the kids are breaking in, and I was just like, that is a really cool shot. Or like the shot that
Yeah.
kind of brought me back to the original Psycho is when the camera is poised in the ceiling, and it's like a down shot of like the balcony and the second floor, because that's the shot that terrified me in Psycho, the first one. And so I love that we're having that, and it's like panning and scanning the area. It just, I don't know, I was enamored with the cinematography in this one, and it makes sense that it's Dean Cundy when I realized it afterwards.
It's always nice seeing films where the camera just where everything's done like in one, or like a master shot where the camera, there's a shot in it where Norman goes up to the house and the camera follows him, and then just pans around and the doctor's just arrived. There was nobody there before, but he's just arrived. It's just really simple stuff, but it's as a filmmaker, it makes you really like think about your own storytelling, and how the simplicity of just letting the camera sit there and guide the audience, rather than
Yeah.
editing too much. And it's that voyeuristic thing that we were talking about before with Halloween, like which obviously was a Hitchcockian
Yeah.
style as well. But yeah, no, that DP, geez, he's got some CV. Well, Jurassic Park as well, which makes sense because obviously Spielberg is massively influenced by Hitchcock.
Yeah, and it seemed like he was Steven Spielberg's go-to for a long time, and Robert Zemeckis, because he did the Back to the Future movies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, Apollo 13, I'm looking, Death Becomes Her, Hook.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess before we do wrap up, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, Dominic. So you were wondering, or you mentioned that it's kind of like you don't know who's doing all the killing. And so I'm curious, do you guys think that the woman that says is his mother, do you think that's in this movie real, or do you think that's in his head? I'm curious, because I just read it as like straight, but it sounded as if like there might be some debate to that. So I'm curious, did you guys think that he was actually doing most of the killing, or what were your guys' thoughts?
When I was a kid, I definitely thought that was in his head.
Okay.
Watching it yesterday without anything else, I'm pretty sure that woman, the way I read it watching it yesterday, was she is also not well, and she thinks she's his mother, but she's not, and
Okay.
she's turned up, and she has become infatuated with him in some way, and she has killed the people that we thought Norman was killing, like greasy motel guy,
Yeah.
boy in the cellar. But she turns up. So she's committed those murders, but Norman has killed Fiona Miles, because I think we saw that was him. Pretty sure we saw that was him. I can't even remember now. So that's how I read it yesterday, but I could be wrong. I'll be looking out for is there a director's commentary? I hope so. What did you think, Mary Beth?
So I didn't think, I mean, like, I thought he killed the one person, obviously, but I thought that it was her too. I read it straight. I read it as like Norman's been trying to not kill, so he hasn't done as many murders as people might be thinking he did. That's how I read the movie as well.
Like, so the thing that gives me pause, like thinking back on it, is I mean, she's kind of, if that's the case, then she is an absolute dick, because whenever someone was picking up the phone, trying to listen in on this conversation that everyone thinks he's having with himself, and she's obviously quiet because, Mary picks up the phone and is trying to listen in, and there's nothing. She just hears Norman talking to himself. So the fact that like she is like, I'm gonna be quiet. It's like that's another layer of upsettingness because
So, but here's the thing. My thing also though was that poor Norman was so fucking gaslit that like he
yeah,
started hearing things. Like I think that some of the phone calls were in his head, but it was because of the gaslighting that
Yeah.
was being set up by Mary and Lila. Like I think that there were obviously there were phone calls happening because Lila was doing phone calls. I think that he got so like they fucked with his head so much that he was imagining the phone calls too. I think that's what's really interesting about the script is I think that there isn't like perhaps a fully correct answer because I think they
right.
do really play with, and I think it's actually really interesting how they play with the effects of gaslighting, like actual effects of what gaslighting can do to someone with a mental illness. Like people say gaslighting a lot nowadays, but I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what gaslighting like really in an extreme form. Not saying that has to
Right.
be what gaslighting is, but like that is gaslighting, like really like forcing someone to question their reality. So I think the
Yeah.
script is smart in never giving you maybe, excuse me, a full answer about what's really going on here. Because
Yeah.
I think it keeps Norman an ambiguously sympathetic character. Because regardless of if he killed anyone or not, you also saw how everyone was fucking with his head the whole time, and
Yeah.
this poor guy is just like regardless of however I feel about the portrayal, his character is deeply traumatized and just needs to be left alone. And this movie is like, well, this is what happens when you fuck with a guy who just wants to be left alone. Like,
Well, and like, I mean, you can like quibble with it, but let's be honest, he's been getting psychiatric help for 22 years.
yeah,
Right? Like he's been getting a lot of help. He is doing what he needs to do. And he gets out, and what's the first thing that happens is people want to put him back into this cage of being this
yeah.
monster. And so that's why I do think that this movie surprised me because of that angle for it. But I also I agree with you, Mary Beth, that it is ambiguous, and I think it's purposefully ambiguous. But I think the reason why I started thinking that, maybe if she were the one calling and they were all real phone calls, because he says that, well, I'm talking to my real mother. And of course it sounds insane because we know that his mother is buried in the ground. But like the fact that he knows that she's her mother speaks to the fact that at least she is actively communicating with him.
It hadn't even occurred to me that was that was the woman at the end speaking to him in that phone call.
Oh yeah.
But that obviously makes sense because of him saying my real mother.
Yeah. And that, because I was like, my real what, because I again, because I didn't remember the ending. I was like, this is so weird. What is he talking about? His real mother? What is happening here? And then when she shows up, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
She phoned at a really, really good time, didn't she?
Yeah.
So, you got to overlook these things, but
Well, do we want to wrap up and give this our ratings out of 5?
That sounds good to me.
All right,
can do that. Yeah.
Terry, you're up first. How many toasted cheese
Oh.
sandwiches out of 5 do you give Psycho 2?
I mean, what's funny to me on Twitter is when I try to like promote work or something, it's like chirps. But then I put out a stupid tweet saying that this movie fucking rips, and everyone's like, yeah, this movie's so great, and it like does bangers. And so I'm like, come on.
Yep.
It's just like an ambient Terry thought at the end of the night, and this is what's getting traction. But this movie to me fucking rips. I was surprised at how good of a sequel to an iconic movie this actually is. I do think it's one of the best horror sequels, particularly considering that it's 20 some odd years after. Is it 20 some odd? I can't remember when Psycho came out, but it's like a long time.
23 years, yeah.
23, a long time. So I don't know. I went into it expecting it to be sort of sleazy trash, to be perfectly honest, and I was very surprised at how much honor and homage it did to the first one, while also doing something that moves the conversation forward and isn't just trying to recreate the magic of the first Psycho. So I think for me, this is 4.5. I'm cutting one of those halves. And for me, I unabashedly love this movie. What about you, Mary Beth?
So I definitely was also expecting like sleazy trash. But I didn't know anything about it, so it was really exciting going in and watching it. I'm like, who's the killer? I don't understand. I was like, everyone's the killer, everyone's bad, and that's fine. And I love that for this movie. Um, I really appreciated a portrayal of like PTSD and like healing from mommy issues. So again, like, yes, I know that I talked about the gender stuff, but that might be more complicated. But regardless of the gender stuff, there is a really good look here at like PTSD and CPTSD. And again, for the 80s of like, this is what it means to like try to like continue living after dealing with like complex trauma for your entire fucking childhood. And like, yeah, you've gotten the help, but it's not always easy. And people also don't respect that. And I think for a genre and for a decade where horror and mental health is like not really a topic that's like ever addressed properly, this movie gets a lot right. And I think there's a really cool conversation being had about Norman Bates as a character that you can tell there's a lot of care. Like we've all said, like a lot of care going into it. So my like own thoughts aside, I think this is like a solid 4 toasted cheese sandwiches out of 5. Dominic, you have the final word. How many toasted cheese sandwiches do you give Psycho 2?
I think we've kind of proved how good the film is because you could discuss it at great length. And I'm not sure we've even really scraped the surface. It has so much going for it.
I know.
And obviously the you know we've touched upon our brief knowledge of Anthony Perkins and his own private life, and how that might have influenced his character, and when you kind of read the film in that way in relation to Psycho and his career, like it's kind of fascinating and it's sad, and there's a lot to say about it, but ultimately it is definitely a superior sequel. Beautifully shot, great script, interesting themes, great performances. I would give it 4 toasted sandwiches.
Heck yeah.
Because I don't want to split my toasted sandwiches in half,
I mean, that's perfectly fair. But so one final thing that I want to mention is apparently like when they were making this movie, Robert Bloch, the author of the original Psycho, wrote a Psycho sequel that was like Norman Bates going to Hollywood because they're making a movie about him or something. And apparently it's really bad, but from what I'm gathering from like a retrospective looking back on it, but like I think it's so fascinating to me that he wanted to go that route, and they're like, oh no, slashes are really big and important. We got to do a different kind of script right now. I think it's better for it because of that. But I kind of want to read the Psycho 2 just to see how.
Because it sounds like Scream or something. Like it's crazy. He wrote a metatextual slasher novel.
Yeah, it's wild.
Crazy bastard.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dominic, for joining us to talk about
honestly,
Psycho 2.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course. So, are you online? Are you on social media? Where can our listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away and talk about what you want to plug.
Yeah. So, Haunted Ulster Live is the main thing, and at Haunted Ulster Live or at Haunted Ulster, I can't remember which, but it's Facebook, Instagram, and the other one, what's it called? Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not calling it X.
Like it's not X.
And Beyond Visible Films is our production company. You can follow us on Instagram as well. And just keep an eye on that for release of the film and our upcoming projects.
Hell yeah. Cool. Well, listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Psycho 2? You can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on social media. I am at MB McAndrews on Twitter, and I'm at MB.McAndrews on Instagram.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on social media. We are at Scarred Podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Scarred for Life Podcast on Instagram.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.